Good morning, everyone. Dr. Christine here, back for another Instagram Live with another awesome practitioner. Today we are going to be speaking with Elena Maganto, which she is a PhD and basically works with people who struggle with gut inflammation related to disorders and weight loss resistance using her unique approach called the Ketotarian Diet Solutions. She actually wrote her own book as well, so I'm going to invite her on here. See, there we go. You should hop on any second. But she's basically a PhD and a functional medicine practitioner, and her PhD is in molecular biology, and she did a postdoctoral training at Harvard University Medical School. Good morning, Elena. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. I'm super glad to be here with you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. I was actually just watching a couple of your videos before this, and you had some video where you were making some incredibly delicious thing with like the crock pot, and then also figuring out how to make a sweet that was low carb and everything. So I'm so happy to have you here today. We can kind of talk about the ways that you like to approach things with clients. Then I know you also have a course coming up, and so
Yeah.
yeah, we can talk about all of those things. So I guess I was just kind of introducing people a little bit, or introducing you a little bit to people, but how would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, so as you said, I'm a PhD in molecular biology. As a background, I was always very curious when I was a little kid how our body functions. So I ended in that direction. And I'm a functional medicine practitioner. And I work with people who suffer from any kind of disorder related to gastrointestinal disorders, digestive distress, inflammation. So,
Beautiful.
and
And I know, like, I've been watching the different things that you post, and like you'll post a lot of things sometimes about just like the different causes of gut stuff and the different causes of bloating, or little things that you can add to your diet, like pumpkin seeds to help boost your immune system and ward off parasites and all that kind of stuff. So I think all of that is great. And I know you kind of got into this because of a story of your own life and your own gut, right? Would you be open to talking about what inspired you?
yes, actually, it's two stories. Mine is not the main inspiration. My mother was the main inspiration. So, talking about myself, I grew up being like super overweight. Like, I didn't really understand why my kids were not the same way that I was, and I didn't know what to do about it. My hormones were completely out of whack. I discovered that later on. I was going to the bathroom maybe 4 to 5 days, and I just thought my body was like that. It was my normal because I just grew up like that. And after figuring that out, I found out that I had candida overgrowth, that I had SIBO, small intestine candida overgrowth, that I was an estrogen dominant. I mean, my body was completely out of control. So I discovered that years later when I ended actually into this path, because when you want to lose weight and then you have gastrointestinal issues, what do? I went to the dietitian, they put me on a gluten-free, dairy-free diet, that's all. Maybe my constipation got a little bit better, but that's it. That didn't really solve any of the triggers that were causing the symptoms. So I was like that for many years until I entered in the functional medicine world. But then my inspiration, what helped me to give the shift into what I do now, and it was my mom. So while I was in pharmaceutical industry, that's the dark side I
Oh,
call myself. Yes, I was for a while in academia. I did my postdoctoral training in Boston. That is what brought me from Spain into the United States. And I was at Harvard for 8 years. But then, I wanted to really help and see the results. So then I felt that I didn't want to just be stuck doing science for the rest of the life, just fighting for money to do science in front of a computer, which at the end is what it is. So I said, oh, maybe I can help people go into pharmaceutical industry. When you are in science, it's like, or you stay at university or you go to pharmaceutical industry. So I did that, and that's how I discovered what I didn't really want to do with anybody. I got very sick myself. I didn't really believe in that system. I learned a lot of things, but not what I really wanted to do. So, but in the meantime, while I was there, is when my mother healed from fibromyalgia. My mother suffered from pain, myalgias, headaches every single day for years. And she had like a whole cabinet, I remember, in the kitchen full of medication. She told me, Elena, I just don't feel good. I've been taking this for years and this doesn't go anywhere. My pain is just increasing. So she decided to go to a doctor in Spain who was also using alternative medicine. In Spain, still we don't call it naturopathic doctors, but who they were is a naturopathic doctor. And then he was treating her emotionally because my mother suffered from depressions during many years, and that became somatic, was affecting her own body and her gut. She had like a lot of gastrointestinal issues. And of course, her serotonin was really low. A lot of neurotransmitters were off. So after working on that, we can tell that after 3 years, she was completely fibromyalgia free and not taking any medication. She lost a lot of weight because she was very overweight from everything that she was taking. And then she was feeling better than ever. So fibromyalgia is usually one of those boxes that the doctor put us as soon as we have pain everywhere and they don't really know what to do. It's like, okay, these are these meds. You need to take your life like that. So yeah, she was fibromyalgia free, so that was my inspiration and my eye opening, and say, this is what I really want to do. This is how I want to help people. I want to prevent. I don't want to keep them sick forever taking a medication, and that what brought me here in my journey.
Wow. That's amazing. And it's just, I feel like so many people struggle with this stuff, right? Where it's just they keep getting put on things over and over and over. And then the other thing that nobody really talks to them about is every medication that you get put on alters your microbiome in a pretty permanent way. And so it's
Yeah.
like kind of this cascade effect and like this snowballing effect. So I think that you talked about a couple really big points where it's like those kind of conditions that just you can't seem to get resolved with medications, it's usually inflammatory based, right? And it's usually like this systemic level of inflammation that you're dealing with. And then there's a couple things that come from that. So it's like we have the inflammation going on, which is causing a lot of the symptoms. But then there's also these like side effect symptoms where when you're dealing with that much inflammation, the biochemistry that your body has to put out basically ends up stealing building blocks from a lot of your other pathways for things like building your neurotransmitters or building your thyroid hormone or building your sex hormones or all of that kind of stuff. So it's like it ends up being this systemic thing. And there's a reason that I titled this live "Your Second Brain," right? Because your gut, your enteric nervous system, I believe I was told in a course once that your enteric nervous system has as many neurons in it as a cat's brain. So you literally have an extra
Yeah.
brain in your gut. And they've shown that there are significantly more pathways traveling from your gut to your brain than there are from your brain to your gut. And that's the whole like Stephen Porges polyvagal theory, all that kind of stuff. So your gut does a lot more than people think. And so I know like you talk sometimes about how if your digestive system is failing, like all your other systems start to fail. I would love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, and as you said, now we just think about the digestive system as something simple, no? People think, oh, my gut is just responsible for breaking down the food, what I eat, I absorb it, and everything is fine. But there are a lot of things that we don't see at the microscopic level that actually are really controlling our entire body. So we can start with the microbiome, for example, that you said. We are 90% of the cells in our body are microbes. The other 10% of who we are is the organs. So we are more microbes than human. If we could see them in the mirror, that is what we would see everywhere. And the most complex is in our digestive system. We have a whole ecosystem and a big diversity of microbes in our gut. There are some opportunistic and some beneficial. So we need to keep a really good homeostasis, a good balance between the beneficial and the opportunistic to be able to keep going. And then I call the digestive system an immunological powerhouse because 80% of our immune system is in the gut. 80%. So it's there because we put too many things through the mouth, so it has to protect our body because, as you said, we have another nervous system that is totally independent from the nervous system that we know. That's the enteric nervous system. So also stress, the release of cortisol, all of that, that can cause a lot of dysbiosis and inflammation. So it's there to protect us. So basically, what happens is that as soon as there are certain triggers in our lifestyle, like I said, stress, which we never think about it, but is the main cause of diseases, any toxins coming from the food, from the environment, from the water, from the air, any pathogens, any medication, not just antibiotics, that start causing a big imbalance between the good and the bad microbes. So the bad microbes start releasing a lot of toxins. Those toxins start attacking the gut lining, the wall of our intestines. So then the cells separate. And that's what is called leaky gut. It's an informal term for gastrointestinal permeability. So now all the toxins, the indigested food that becomes a toxin, everything goes through. And then is when our immune system say, hey, what's going on in here? This is something strange. So I have to protect your body. So start inducing inflammation. Inflammation is just a tool. It's the machine to fight. But when this end up being chronic and happens for months, for years, everything that ends up going to the bloodstream start attacking different tissues in our body. So as you very well said before, it's all about systemic inflammation. Instead of putting names to the symptoms that we get, we just need to call it systemic inflammation. And that's why a lot of the myalgias, the arthritic pains that we get, even autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's, Graves, Jordan syndrome, there are a lot of autoimmune conditions that are just related to systemic inflammation. So it's about going back into that course of action and go to the root cause. It is the food that I'm eating, or maybe it's that I'm going through a lot of stress, or maybe I have mold in my house or any other environmental toxin. So that can definitely attack our gut. So instead of putting band-aids with tons of supplements, we first have to start thinking about cleaning what is the trigger.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm a huge fan of using supplements in the right way, but I think also like you can hop on that trend train of doing too much, right? Just like you can hop on a trend train of doing too much of one particular diet. And it's like, one of the reasons I love having these conversations, especially with people like yourself who have such a background in it, is food is probably one of the most confusing things for people these days, right? And it's like, oh, am I supposed to do a FODMAP diet? Am I supposed to do a histamine diet? Am I supposed to do
Yeah.
a keto diet? Am I supposed to do all these different things? And it's like, it's really dependent on your body and where you're at and what you're dealing with. Because it's like a FODMAP might work really well for someone, and that basically means like not eating foods that are fermented easily because you have an overgrowth of bacteria in your gut. Whereas for somebody else, it might be really important to not eat like lots of sugar and dairy, like dealing with candida or eating particular things to help nix that microorganism. And then it bleeds into all these other things like she's talking about with the systemic inflammation. So when our gut gets inflamed in that way, it becomes this cascade of things. And you guys know I often talk about the gut in relation to injury, and people are like, well, how in the heck can like breaking a bone or spraining my ankle cause leaky gut? Well, it's exactly like she was talking about. It's a stress response, right?
Yeah.
And the stress response, even though we use it in a lot of different ways, it uses the same pathway and it uses the same building blocks and the same hormones and all that kind of stuff. So we start to take our building blocks away at the same time that the damage, or I know she's talked in some of her videos about it, like having an infection, like a parasite, and I'll let her speak to that more. But it's like having those in your gut can actually create an inflammatory cascade that then starts to damage the villi in the gut, which is like your absorption surface. And when those start to get damaged, then you can't absorb your nutrients as well, which means that you can't build it back as well. So it's this system where it's getting broken down and your team for rebuilding is being affected at the same time. So there's different things that you can do to start to heal your gut. But this is why if I have patients who get injured, the first thing I have them do is go on an anti-inflammatory diet, because if they're eating things that are inflaming them, it's like she was talking about, where your body essentially gets distracted with those things, and then you're also like affecting the building teams, and then you can't heal and repair as well, or maybe you do heal from your injury but you didn't heal as well as you would have, and then you might get re-injured in the future. So I would love to hear your thoughts just kind of on like the healing component of things, and then also the pain component of things, which I think is a huge tie to fibromyalgia, like you were talking
Yeah.
about, right? Because people don't always understand where that pain comes from, but a lot of the time it's our inflammatory pathways upregulating certain things. So
Yeah.
please inform
So
us.
for example, connecting pain to the gut, as is what we're talking about here, that's very important. It's not just the inflammatory response, so it could be related to an autoimmune or an autoinflammatory response. For example, the difference is if we start having systemic inflammation circulating around, and then that is specifically attacking the tissue, that is an auto-inflammatory response. Autoimmune is when when the immune system was attacking something else, maybe a virus, a bacteria, and then out of the blue get distracted and start attacking a tissue that has a very similar antigen structure to the virus that was fighting. So that's a secondary effect, and that can cause an autoimmune condition. Or, for example, if a person has Epstein-Barr virus in the thyroid, which is really common, and start attacking the thyroid as a side effect, can start attacking the virus as a side effect, attacks the thyroid. So that causes autoimmunity. So that's one of the ways it can cause pain. But the other way has been shown in studies, for example, when a person has gastrointestinal issues, stop producing certain neurotransmitters. For example, serotonin, which is the one that makes us feel good and happy, but also enkephalins. And enkephalins are a type of opiates that we produce in our gut. And what they do is that they shut down the production of substance P, and substance P is produced by the spinal cord and inhibits pain. So basically, if we don't produce enough enkephalins because our gut is not working well, we're not able to inhibit pain anymore. So that's why all the pains, the stiffness, the arthritic pain, the myalgias are more aggravated. Other people have pains type of migraines, constant migraines and headache like my mother had. And that can be related, for example, to two things in our gut. So one is the release of histamine, people that suffer from histamine intolerance, and you mentioned before an anti-histamine diet. So histamine is an element that our immune system is releasing as soon as we have a trigger that causes an allergic reaction. If we produce more than what we can break down, we end up with histamine intolerance, and then we start reacting to everything, and can pass also the brain barrier, can cause a lot of attacks the trigeminal nerve, can cause a lot of headaches. Also, the production of TNF alpha and cytokines, the cytokine storms that can happen systemically coming from the gut, can cause a cytokine storm also in our brain and cause headaches and many other symptoms. So it's basically a war. What is happening in our gut? As soon as we end up with leaky gut, with inflammation, it's a combination of a lot of things. The inflammation itself, not producing enough neurotransmitters, is too much histamine. It's a lot of things that we will have to identify with the proper testing, because as you said, every person's body is different. So the approach has to be tweaked for each person. So, as you said, one of the main approaches in my books was the Keto diet solution. But that approach has to definitely be changed for every person's body. So that is extremely important. There are more than 100 different types of dietary theories out there. So it's about taking from them whatever that person needs.
Yep. Ah, yes, I love that. Thank you. And I mean, I guess if I were to kind of define for people like a general anti-inflammatory diet that you can think of, if you're like, I don't even know where to start, I would generally tell them to focus most of their attention on veggies and Also like lean organic protein. Organic matters because if you're spraying your food with poison and then you're eating it, it actually disrupts the gut. A lot of people don't know this, but the way that pesticides work
Yeah.
is they actually break down the gut lining of the insect. So why we thought that that wouldn't happen to us if we eat that, I don't understand. But that's how
Yeah.
pesticides work. They kill the bug from the inside out. So try to avoid pesticides. And then just really focusing on the veggies, the lean protein, nuts and seeds. And I like to tell people what to focus on, right? Because if you make a list of all the things you can't have, it feels really restrictive, but you have to remember that most of that list isn't actually food. It's chemicals that are produced
Yeah.
in a factory somewhere. And so it's like the list becomes shorter when you're actually looking at foods.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to like really healing things, like my favorite morning beverage I like to drink is bone broth. And it's really easy to make, and it's one of the most healing things you can do for your gut, because our gut is always going to be stressed. It's not like you heal it and you're all done. It's like you heal it and you get it to a point where it's more resilient, and then it's a thing that you're managing for the rest of your life, just like everything else in our life. Like you don't like lose weight once and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. It's like it's a thing that
Yeah.
you maintain. So will you tell us a little bit about your book too, and like just kind of what is the ketotarian approach that you
Yeah.
developed?
So, as you said, it's very similar to what you were saying. It's an anti-inflammatory approach. But as we said, it will have to be tweaked for different people if they have to go more antihistamine or low FODMAP. That depends on whatever the tests say. But this is basically a low-carb anti-inflammatory approach because most of the people that has gastrointestinal problems, they have gut dysbiosis as well. And gut dysbiosis means an imbalance between the bad and the good microbes. And what happens with the bad microbes is that they love sugar, they love carbs. As soon as we are putting carbs in the body, they start fermenting, and causing a lot of toxin buildup. So that's why the book goes into an anti-inflammatory approach. Why I have called it Mediterranean is because, and I'm from Spain, so I believe in the Mediterranean diet, but also we know that it's very popular, the ketogenic diets. I don't like any of them 100% because on an anti-inflammatory approach, there is still a lot of inflammatory foods. What I don't like either about the conventional just ketogenic diet is that they don't talk about carbs much. You have to decrease your amount of carbs a lot on your plate. So actually people think you don't even have even vegetables on your plate. And actually you can have a whole bowl of salad or a lot of vegetables on your plate and still follow those macros for a low carb approach. So what is important is to know what type of vegetables. So I'm not the type of person that likes counting macros and proportions and things like that. What I introduced in that dietary approach, as you said, 50 to 75% of your plate has to be vegetables. The most you focus on low starchy vegetables if it's possible. And there are tons of them. You don't have to be deprived. There's a lot of food that you can still eat in there, and I put a list in that book. And then stick to the clean protein, even the clean vegetables, because no matter what dietary theory we decide to go, it's about eating clean and eating a clean source, as you said, because that's what is causing the main damage in our gut. So it's following kind of like the approach that you mentioned without counting any macros, is taking the best of both worlds, the low carb and the anti-inflammatory Mediterranean diet, but eliminating the foods that cause the inflammation. So that's what I have combined in there. And I add turmeric and ginger everywhere in those recipes because those are two of my favorite anti-inflammatory roots in the planet as well. So we have to start adding them as salt and pepper everywhere. So turmeric and ginger everywhere.
I think that's great, right? And it's like I feel like we just haven't always been taught how to cook this way or with these things, and that's where learning how to cook different kinds of food can be really helpful. And Dr. Elena has some cool videos on her channel about like ways to food prep so that you're not in the kitchen all the time, because let's be real, we don't all have time for that. We're
No.
usually pretty busy people. And so it's like figuring out ways to set yourself up for success, because if you come home late and you don't have anything to eat, you're probably going to snack on the thing that you're not supposed to. And then there's like a whole other thing where timing of your eating matters, because it's like if you're eating a whole bunch of stuff right before you go to bed, especially if you eat a bunch of sweets right before you go to bed, a lot of people don't realize that you're actually temporarily putting yourself into a state of functional diabetes because you increase
Yeah.
your blood sugar in your bloodstream and then you don't get to release it because you're sleeping. And so it's actually quite important to try to give your body some time and allow it to digest and things like that. And then I know we've talked before too a little bit about just like posture, and that can
No,
actually affect your
I
gut
me
health.
stress
And
much.
yes, and this also, like, this is why I like, if patients struggle with like heartburn or something, I'll be like, great, please don't lie down or slouch on the couch after you eat a large meal, because it puts a lot of stress on the actual structure of your organs. And so it's like, if we can start to learn about our bodies and learn about our organs in a certain way, then we start to be more mindful of these things, because now we just know about it and no one ever talked to us about it before. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, so posture, and actually I relate to that. Talking about my story in the past, I my posture sitting on the desk was really bad. Always studying on the edge of my chair, so like that, like a lot of people do. And actually, I had SIBO, I have candida overgrowth, I have a lot of gut issues, and I think part of it was also related to my posture, because there is actually a Harvard study showing that when you have this type of posture, what you are doing is compressing your organs. Like if you think about it, we are not stretched, we are compressing all our organs. And what that is doing in our intestines is creating little packets, like patches, where everything is dumped in. Like the indigested food that we don't break
Mhm.
down,
Just
everything
sits
gets
there.
stuck. So then is when we start causing a lot of microbial overgrowth and dysbiosis. So small intestine bacteria overgrowth or candida overgrowth could come just from that fermentation and those patches that are caused from the posture. And then that causes bloating and all those side effects from leaky gut. And the other thing is, for example, the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is connecting the brain with our gut. And when we have this type of posture, it gets kind of twisted, not working, signaling very well. And I call the vagus nerve the healing nerve, right? It's the healing, the calming nerve. So if it's not working well, our body goes into a big imbalance and can start affecting different systems, and that's including the gut as well. So yeah, there's a lot of things that our posture can do, and that imbalance of mitochondria, with not mitochondria, that imbalance of microbes that we get from the patches and the overgrowth can affect our mitochondria as well, which I think is also very important to talk about. The mitochondria is in every single cell of the body beside red blood cells, and that's even our gut. And the mitochondria is the one taking the fuel, the fat, the sugars, and then making ATP, which is the energy that I'm using right now for talking to you, for anything that we do. So if we have a gut microbial dysbiosis that could come from bad posture, for example, then what happens is that it's not signaling the mitochondria properly. The mitochondria stops using the fuel, so we don't burn fat. That's why we start accumulating a lot of fat in the midsection, and then we don't produce energy, and we can also end up with fatigue. So there's a lot of things that can happen in there, but posture is a big trigger for a lot of these problems.
Well, and this is why movement is so important too. And I think that's where, like, this is what I'll work on with clients sometimes, is because when you're injured and you can't move and you can't do the things that you normally do, it's incredibly frustrating. And then you start to get these gut symptoms from things like that, in addition to the stress pathway that turned on because you got injured. So now you're dealing with inflammation. Now you're dealing with not being able to move to mitigate it. And then you're also stealing from your neurotransmitters, you're stealing from your hormones. And then when your gut gets disrupted, you're also not producing serotonin in the same way. So not only are you stealing from the ones that exist, you're not producing it in the same way. And then you start to go through this where you just kind of don't feel like yourself in like an emotional way. And I think this is something that people don't talk about. Like, you can start to feel kind of crazy and like you should just be able to get over it. But no, it's like an actual biochemical thing that's
Yeah.
happening in your body. And so this is where I love her stuff, right? Is because yes, like, you're addressing your gut health, but you're also addressing everything else because your second brain runs so much. So like, if I'm working with someone who's been injured and we're kind of working on these things, it's like sometimes I'll also see food sensitivities that they didn't have before show up, and that has to do with the gut becoming a bit leaky from the stress pathways. So then it's even more important for them to kind of nix those foods that tend to be inflammatory, because they're now like doubly inflammatory compared to what they used to be. And so when we're in this path, it's like, okay, so we're going to come down to an anti-inflammatory diet. And then there's certain things that I like to have them include. So making sure that you're getting all your amino acids so that you can build those neurotransmitters and you can provide the building blocks that are needed for your cells and for your chemical pathways. So if you're, dealing with like cartilage injury, like lots of lysine, things like that. I like to make sure people include the healthy protein she was talking about, but if you're vegan, making sure that you're getting them in some form, or making sure that you're getting B12, which is usually found in animal products. And so if you're not eating animal products, getting it in some other way, because it's needed for cell dividing and replenishment and things like that. And I would love to hear any tips you have on like specific foods for healing specific tissues, if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean that you said is so important about the B12. There's a lot of vegans that are not putting enough B12 in their body, and actually B vitamin, not just B12, are extremely important for producing those neurotransmitters, the neurotransmitter cascade. So serotonin, how well we sleep, because maybe we don't have serotonin that produces melatonin to be able to sleep at night. There's so many deficiencies, and having gastrointestinal inflammation can cause a lot of malabsorption as well. So sometimes the main problem that I see on these people is not just they are not taking the supplements or they are not eating the right foods, is that they cannot absorb them because they have a lot of inflammation. So that is why I have a case, for example, of a person that was under medication, laying in bed for 4 years. His intestine was completely stopped, collapsed, like not absorbing everything, completely fatigued, and constipated chronically. So the only way that I'm not really a good friend of raw vegetables for people with gastrointestinal issues, but the only way he has to absorb at that moment is just drinking juices. He has to drink his vitamins and minerals somehow on a way that it was pre-digested in order to start absorbing and healing that gut lining. So then after, he could start putting more solid foods that he could break down and absorb. So it depends on really on what stage they are. But yeah, like as you said, protein is essential. Vegetables is the main thing that they need to see on their plate, but protein is essential. It's the building block, not just of our muscles, but also for producing those neurotransmitters and hormones, and it's important. Fiber is also important, can be a weapon for a lot of people with IBS. So it's why how we eat the food, what type we eat, what type of fiber is also important. But fiber is a prebiotic, which is food for the beneficial bacteria in the gut. But that is why we will need to know if they have SIBO or not, because those type of prebiotics can cause more SIBO overgrowth. So yeah, it's just focus on the vegetables, I would say, first, on your vegetables, on your lean protein, clean. As I mentioned before, ginger and turmeric, those are my favorite foods. Nuts and seeds, if they don't have diverticulosis or diverticulitis, and chew them very well. That's the key,
Yes. Oh,
chewing.
awesome. Well, and what she was talking about with like, so she just described, who should eat fiber versus maybe who shouldn't eat it as much, which is why the food can be confusing, because you're like, well, I was told to eat vegetables, but I get this bloating and it's really uncomfortable. And so that might mean that you have something else going on in your gut versus the person next to you who's like, I eat vegetables and I'm fine. And so this is where it's really nice to work with some kind of functional medicine practitioner like myself or Dr. Elena. And I believe she also has some courses coming up that kind of address some of this stuff. So I think you had kind of a unbloat transformational program and another one to eliminate stubborn abdominal fat. Is that correct?
So what I have is a free masterclass coming next week that I think is the one that people should join. It's completely free. The title is The Top Strategies to Eliminate Bloating and Stubborn Abdominal Fat, because those are the two main symptoms that usually people complain when they have a gastrointestinal issue. But basically, what I'm going to be talking about in there, the content in that class, is going to be related to everything that we have been talking in here to identify how we can identify we have those type of gastrointestinal issues. What other things can be causing pain, autoimmunity, misalignment, microbial imbalance. So I'm going to talk about the biggest IBS mistakes that people commit. I'm going to talk about the danger of visceral fat, which is one of the things that can happen as a side effect of gastrointestinal inflammation, the accumulation of abdominal fat that is really dangerous for our body. And also, which are the main triggers of the IBS symptoms, and what is the top strategy and solution to eliminate it. So yeah, it's completely free. It's happening next week. I do it 2 consecutive days, so if one person cannot join one day, can join another one. So I give them flexibility, and yeah, I hope to bring them as much information as I can to help them in their health journey. So I think you are gonna put the link in the comments. Yeah.
Yep. Yep, I will go ahead and put the links there. And then if people want to get in touch with you any other ways,
Yeah.
because I know you have to go today, what are some other areas where they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, so they can DM me here on Instagram, or also have the link in my bio. And yeah, I have also my website over there. They can go in there, but just personal message me any question that they may have about this topic. I will be very happy to help.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time this morning to chat a little bit and just to kind of cover for anyone who jumped in a little bit late. You can go back and watch the recording earlier. We kind of talked about Dr. Elena's story and how she got into this realm, which oriented around kind of healing from fibromyalgia and having a family member heal from that. And then we talked about how pain can really be tied to actually inflammation in your gut and having excess pain, which is basically a part of the neurochemical pathway that happens when this stuff is going on. And talking about how neurotransmitters can be affected by this and your hormones can be affected by this, and why food is so confusing and how like different people benefit from different diets depending on what's going on. And then back to her courses where she'll be talking a bunch more about this. So check out her free masterclass. And if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out. So thank you so much and have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. Bye bye.
Bye.